Right off the bat, I would like to say that I personally don't believe that there is a right or a wrong choice with regards the final decisions you end up making with the companions. This video series, of which this is the third video, is more to explain what I personally think these choices could mean. So you can ask yourself if it applies to the companions or your particular flavor of rook for role playing purposes. So, should you nudge Hardin towards compassion or to embrace her anger? Well, then, keep watching. Before I jump straight into the video, however, quick introduction. Hello, I'm Noria, and on this channel, I make analysis type videos about characterizations, character arcs, narrative structures, themes, and story across different mediums, not limited to TV, movies, books, anime, and video games. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, do consider hitting the subscribe button. Or check out my Let's Play channel, P.S. It's Noria, for my gameplay videos. And with that done, let's talk about Liz Harding and the choice you have to make for her at the end of her companion quest. Because honestly, I do think that her companion quest speaks a lot to the conundrum we find ourselves in when we are trying to process our trauma and past hurts and trying to navigate the best way to move on. Do we do so by embracing our anger or by approaching the situation with compassion? With Lace Hardin, we see her battling this choice from the very first time we uncover Solas's memories and the truth about what actually happened to the Titans and how the Evanuris gained physical form was revealed to the companions and Rook. Lace, who is devastated by the realization that her ancestors were eradicated by another group who, desirous of their power and how it would serve their interests, drained the Titan's resources and life force. And she is left reeling with that discovery. We hear ambient conversations all around the lighthouse. And you also get to talk to her as Rook as she expresses her anger and distress at Solus, a friend, having full knowledge of what he and the rest of the Evanuris had done, and yet said nothing to her about it. We see her mourn what her people had lost by virtue of what the Evanuris did to the Titans, how that cut them off completely from the Fade, made them unable to dream or access the powers that rightfully should be theirs by birth, by virtue of them being dwarves. And in all the conversations when this happens, we see Lace Hardin question this. She chews on it, gnaws on it, can't stop thinking about it. And ultimately, this discovery of the injustice written into her very bones is what unearths and births the Titan's rage, her rage, that we have to confront in Lace's companion quest. Now, I love the companion quest, some more than others, but Lace's would always hold a special place in my heart. And that's not just because I believe Lace Hardin deserves the world. It's also because in Lace's story and her particular quest, I see parallels to oppressed groups who have been devastated, exploited, or genocided by those who seek to steal and ravage their resources. And what we do, what we get to do with all that rage, what we do with all that emotion, how we process what a history and legacy of that type of brutalization has on us in present time. Do we approach that with compassion? Do we embrace the anger? Do we do both? And of course, Lacey's mission and quest also brings to mind the realization that a group can oppress and devastate an indigenous community only for others to come over and put them through a similar level of annihilation that they levied on those who were before them, as we see with the case of the ancient elves and their battle and loss of it to Tevinter. And yet, both the indigenous community and those who built their lives on those lands and were in turn brutalized by another invading force are both victims in various different ways. But back to thoughts about how do descendants of indigenous groups who have been brutalized, how do we process that history? How do we come to terms with what our ancestors went through? What is the way forward for us? Like I have said in a lot of the other videos in this video series I've made about the different choices we've had to make in Dragon Age the Veilguard. Check out the Veilguard Choices playlist. None of the choices are actually right or wrong. I personally don't believe that that is the reason why they exist. Instead, for the story that Veilguard is telling, I am firmly in the camp that these choices instead are representative of what we believe on an ideological level. They speak to our perspectives and beliefs and what matter more to us as we navigate life. And so, just as with the city choice and the Griffin's choice, the choice of whether or not Lace Hardin should embrace the anger or turn to compassion instead in resolving that part of herself hurting from what was done to the Titans is one that speaks to how you or your rook react to a history of exploitation and devastation of your ancestry and what kind of heritage that leaves behind. Are you someone who would instead choose to acknowledge that pain? To let the realization of what you've lost and what has been forcefully taken from those that came before you drive you to feel all that rage? It is important to remember that neither of these choices on Lacey's part led to some sort of negative or physical reaction on her point. Instead, they show the duality of her character. What instead the choice seeks to do is to help settle and calm her inner turmoil and help her decide on what the best path forward is. And in so doing, this can apply to you as the player character as well. If you're someone who has been lucky enough to not have a history of brutalization and pain that is a heritage you have to come to terms with, then lucky you. If, however, you know that has been the history of your people, and this applies whether you're African, African American, Irish, Welsh, Roma from the Caribbean, First Nations, or indigenous to the lands on which settlers have built their lives and have done everything to erase your existence, your history, your story, then you would understand why anger is a possible recourse offered to Lace Harding as a choice for her, and by extension you, to consider. Because in this case, Lace is representative of those of us who hear of our history, who read about what has been done to us, what we've lost, and react understandably with anger. Anger at a pain so deep that you shake uncontrollably, that you want to scream and yell and want to destroy. It is the anger that recognizes what those who came before you had to suffer, had to endure, and grieves at that loss, at that pain. Anger sometimes, especially when you're processing trauma, is a response for the helplessness, the pain that whatever you're reacting to caused. And with Lace, her anger is one that she shares both with the Titans who were thus destroyed and for herself, for what was taken from her. Her dreams, her ability to feel connected deeply, intimately with the stone, her connection to the Fade, the Evanuris with their forceful taking of lyrium, the life force of the Titans, not only brutalized them, but in turn ensured that generations of their descendants would continue to suffer, unaware that a large part of who they are will forever be out of reach because of what was done to their ancestors. It's the two ends of what Lace feels. And thus, choosing to encourage her to embrace her anger means that either you or your rook are telling her, and by extension, yourself, remember, these choices are often ideological driven. You're telling Lace that yes, anger is logical, anger is expected, anger is a valid response to all that you have lost. Anger is a valid response to all you could have been. Anger is a valid response to everything that could have happened to you, the new worlds and experiences that you could have had and would never get the chance to because of someone else's actions that was driven by their selfish motives. Which for me means that choosing to have Lace embrace her anger means that you're someone who believes that points of grief and echoes of pain need to be acknowledged, need to be seen, need to be felt, need to be accepted. If you're someone who believes in shadow work, whether it's from a metaphysical perspective or psychological one, in that your therapist keeps trying to get you to see that hiding from your pain and your body's reaction to being hurt so deeply is not the way to completely heal. If you're someone who believes in fully acknowledging your shadow self and accepting of all aspects of you, the messy part, the angry part, the part that bears a grudge for slights long gone, then you just might have chosen to have Lace Harding embrace her anger. But anger isn't the only valid way to process ancestral trauma like that. Sometimes doing so means that you as a person are stuck in the past, in the pain, in the grief. Some people are okay with living like that It grants them strength. It propels them to succeed regardless because of all of that rage. However, there are people who believe that sitting in all of that loss takes away from what they have now, from what their lives are now, from what they've been able to build and make of themselves and of their lives. For those people, choosing compassion is the preferred choice. Because with compassion, you get to have Liz Harden see that she's more than the anger. She's more than what was done to her and her people. She's Lace. Funny, witty, and a great shot. She loves turnip goat stew, loves to cook, even if some of her lighthouse roommates are not the best fans of her cooking. She loves camping out in nature. She can sing, loves her ma and her pet Mabari. Liz Harden is not the Titans. And with the choice of compassion for her, you get to help her see that. Because it's so easy to drown beneath the weight of everything that you've experienced and what could have been if certain situations hadn't panned out the way they did. With Lacey's choice of compassion, Dragon Age the Veil Guard gets to remind us that sometimes it is okay to choose you. Sometimes it is okay to let go of that burden, that it is in living for yourself and living well that you best honor what it is that your ancestors went through, what it is that you've experienced. I say what it is that you've experienced because these choices go beyond what happened to those who came before you. They can also apply if you're someone who's experienced some sort of emotional scars in your past. And the question of how to best process that as you seek to heal is something that always comes up. Do you embrace your anger at what happened to you? Because it wasn't fair. You didn't deserve that. You deserved kindness and empathy and love and compassion, and something in your past didn't extend that to you. So you're reacting with anger at the unfairness, the injustice in the world. That reaction is valid. It is a very valid response. But so is if your choice is compassion. If you decide that you're not going to let whatever you went through break you, that you're not going to let whatever you experienced change you in whatever way, that instead you get to decide who you are, not your past, not whatever came before, not whatever actions were taken against you. No, you get to make that choice. To extend compassion to the past you who didn't know any better, who didn't deserve what they went through. And to extend that same compassion and to yourself in the present. To decide that treating yourself better is how you're going to live, by remembering who you are and what makes you, you. Now, I know for both the anger and compassion points, I kept mentioning ancestral pain and healing, and that is because, if we're being honest, those two are at the core of Lace Hardin's story in Dragon Age the Veil Guard. The sudden power that she's given, the dreams that follow, the way her senses expand, the grief she feels, and the decision that she finally has to take. It's all tied to the legacy of her ancestors, which sometimes we don't ask for. But by virtue of the fact that they lived, your ancestors lived and fought and struggled to survive, to make it so that you can exist, can be alive right here today as you're watching this. It's a core part of our existence as human beings that we cannot separate or remove ourselves from. It is a core part of lace too. And I do think that whether you choose to acknowledge what they went through and feel the rage of what was done to them, or you choose to live for yourself, acknowledging their trauma by promising to do better in your own life so that that trauma ends with you. Either option is okay. You just get to decide which you feel is right for you personally or for whoever your rook is. Like I say in these videos, it's what makes the choices we get in Dragon Age the Veilguard even more delicious to me. Because I get to think about what those choices mean, what they say, and how that could possibly apply to my very human existence. That's what art is for, isn't it? And for those who are curious, Larima chose to encourage Liz Harding to embrace her anger. Because personally, I am someone who is fueled by the rage of my experiences and what my ancestors have been through. Darren, who is the rook for my second run, is going to choose compassion instead. Because at the same time, I also know that the best way to show my gratitude for all that my ancestors experienced, that I have also experienced, is to live well. Unlike with the other choices, I'm going to oscillate between both until I decide on what my canonical choice would be. Which, knowing me, and my friends will not be surprised by this answer, will most likely be to get Lace to embrace her anger and rage. But that's me. What about you? What options did you choose for Lace? And which would you make your canon choice? Anger or compassion? Please drop it in the comments as I would love to know. Hit the like button if anything I said resonates. Hit the dislike button if you think I'm speaking utter balderdash. The choice is yours, really. You get to decide. If, however, you did enjoy the video though, please consider sharing it. It helps me reach a wider audience, and who knows, people might find that they like my corner of the internet a little better, which therefore helps my channel grow and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my Patreons who have been pretty instrumental in helping me keep the lights on. Thank you. If you would like to join this wonderful people in supporting me, the link to do so is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Whilst you wait for new content from me, do consider checking out my last video where I talked about what the ideological thought is behind the choice of who you actually give the griffins to, the wardens or Alathan Forest itself. I did enjoy that video, but it isn't doing as well as I'd hoped. So if you can give it a watch as well, that would be much appreciated. Until next time, however, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.